but it is essential for the future of this state that it does happen.
Attorney General Abbott, you say you want the #1 education system in the country. How much additional money per student, if any, would your plan require, and where would that money come from?
Brian, the amount additional per student varies from program to program. For example, in my pre-K4 program that I want to elevate to be the premier high-quality pre-K program in America, I want to add $1,500 more per student. But you also need to look at the big picture here. The amount that we are going to spend on education in the next biennium in the state of Texas is going to be $60 billion. It's a huge number. So the important thing is that we be wise and strategic about how we dedicate that funding. Where I want to dedicate that funding is first and foremost on building a solid foundation for education at the very beginning from pre-K all the way through third grade. Second is I do want to invest in teachers. I want to ensure that teachers both have the resources, the training, and the salaries to ensure we have the best top quality teachers in America.
Time. Rebuttal.
Senator Davis, I still didn't hear a dollar amount from you. Do you have one?
Mr. Abbott, you are talking out of both sides of your mouth. On the one hand, you are fighting to keep our students in overcrowded classrooms, teachers laid off across the state, and school closings in place. And yet you say you want to make Texas #1 in education. You cannot accomplish that goal without making the appropriate investments. And when you talk about local control, what you really mean is exactly what's been happening today. Pushing those costs down to the local level, increasing property taxes for families across this state, and unfortunately keeping their children in a situation where they're not getting the education that they deserve. Your pre-K plan will pick and choose which children get quality pre-K and which do not, and it does not offer full-day pre-K.
So no dollar amount.
As I said, Brian, this is a vision that will be set for the legislature, and it has to be looked at in two very important ways. If we fail to invest, and by the way, I did file a bill to change the school funding formula in the last legislative session that would increase per pupil funding. If we do not make those investments, we know that we're going to continue exactly where we are today.
Attorney General Abbott.
We're going to give Attorney General Abbott a little extra time, too.
Yes.
Okay.
The amount of money that you're talking about increasing spending per pupil still does not get us to the national average, which is about $11,000. Should we be at least at the national average on spending per pupil?
Brian, I actually think that we need to look at it from the opposite direction. The way that you are looking at it and the way that you're focusing on it is the way that a lot of people do. And that is they say, well, how much should we spend? Let me tell you, no business starts out by saying, well, gosh, we need to spend X amount and then create a product. Brian, what we really need to do is we need to create the best school system in America and then fund it. So before we talk about the dollar amount, we need to talk about what we are providing for the students in the classroom. My plan that I've rolled out creates the best classroom environment for students in the United States of America from pre-K all the way through graduation.
So you believe that we can create the #1 education system in the nation by spending below the national average per pupil?
Let me give you
Let's answer this quickly, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Easy example that will put it into perspective, and that is California spends a lot more per pupil than does the state of Texas. Despite that fact, Texas students perform as well, if not better, on NAEP test. And so it shows more spending doesn't always lead to better results.
Thank you very
much. Right now, Texas is turning its back on $100 billion in federal money. If elected governor, would you be willing to negotiate with the federal government on a plan that lowers premiums as well as reduces the local tax burdens? Or would you, like Governor Perry, refuse to talk to Washington and make a deal?
Well, Grummer, what I think is the best strategy for the state of Texas would be for the state of Texas to be able to get a block grant where we would have that level of flexibility so we could address the unique health care challenges that the people of the state of Texas face. We know, Gromer, that these bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., they don't know how to address our health care problems.
Let me just say, I hate to cut you off, but
That's
some
all right.
conservatives, even in the legislature, say block grants aren't a practical solution.
Block grants have been used effectively in states like Rhode Island, in Indiana, and I think they can be used now. But Gromer, let's even get beyond this. I have laid out strategies in which I will improve health care spending on areas where we can genuinely improve people's lives. I want to increase spending on women's health care. I want to increase spending for veterans, for the disabled, for mental health needs. But what I don't want to do is to bankrupt Texas by imposing on Texas the overwhelming Obamacare disaster.
Senator Davis, if elected governor, you will be dealing with an overwhelmingly Republican legislature unless Democrats get everything they want in November. How would you bring $100 billion to Texas?
You know, this is an issue about doing the right thing for the people of this state. I have to laugh when I hear Mr. Abbott talk about bankrupting Texas. Right now, Texans are writing hard-earned tax dollars to the IRS, $100 billion of which will never come back to work for us in our state unless we bring it back. As governor, I will bring it back. Greg Abbott's plan is to have you write that tax check and send it to California and New York. He is California's best friend in Texas. But there is a reason Republican governors around this state have found a solution to bring that money to their states. There's a reason that chambers of commerce around this state have all come forward begging us to do the right thing and bring that money back to work for us. It will create an estimated 300,000 jobs per year in our state. A true leader stops partisan posturing and does the right thing for her state and brings her tax dollars back to work for her community.
Okay, time for rebuttal.
Attorney General Abbott, the county judges for the 6 largest counties in this state want some sort of solution.
It's important for the people at home to understand this. If anyone believes that California is getting a penny more money because Texas is not participating in Obamacare, then they are the same people who believe the phrase by the president, if you like your doctor, you'll get to keep your doctor. Let me tell you the facts. The facts are that Texas, by not participating in Obamacare, California is not going to get one single penny more. Another fact is if Texas does participate in Obamacare, it will cost the taxpayers of Texas more than $10 billion during the first 10 years of implementation. But even worse is that if Texas participates, we are making a deal with a federal government that is $18 trillion in debt. That is a bargain I'm not willing to make as governor.
Senator Davis, you're chuckling and shaking your
head. Well, what Mr. Abbott's saying is just absolutely not true. Our tax dollars will go to supplement health care in California and New York if we do not bring them back here. Our check that we write to the IRS will not get any smaller. And in fact, the checks that we write for our property taxes will grow. There's a reason that Republican and Democratic county judges around this state have come together and unified around the idea of bringing that tax money back to work for us, because they know that their hospital districts will have to increase taxes in order to take care of that unfunded care. Studies show that our investment to bring those dollars down will yield a net tremendous positive benefit for this state, including the job creation that will come from it.
Okay, thanks to both of you. We're going to shift gears now, and we're going to give the candidates, each of you, an opportunity to ask each other a question. We flipped a coin, and we'll start with Attorney General Abbott, who has a question for Senator Davis.
Well, the timing could hardly be better for this question. I noticed that you said recently that you want to impose Obamacare on the people of Texas so badly that even if the conservative Texas legislature would not vote to approve it, you would go around the legislature and use an executive order to impose Obamacare on the people of Texas. So, Senator, my question to you is, what part of the Texas Constitution gives the governor the authority to go around the legislature and use an executive order to impose a law like Obamacare?
What I've argued, Mr. Abbott, is that we should bring Medicaid expansion to Texas. Medicaid expansion is all about bringing our tax dollars back to work for us. And as a member of the Texas legislature, I can tell you that every hospital association, every Chamber of Commerce member, and Republicans alike in our Texas legislature agreed that we should do the right thing by our state and bring that money back to work for us. What I've also said is that Medicaid expansion included the authority to bring it to states through executive order. But what I would prefer to do, and what I will do, is work with my legislature, Republicans and Democrats alike, who know that this is the right thing to do for their communities, who aren't afraid of being labeled as partisans, and who are more interested in doing right by their citizens. And I'll work with them to bring their tax dollars, our community tax dollars, back to Texas and to keep property taxes from increasing. There is no question whatsoever that if we don't bring this money back down to work for us, our citizens across this state are going to pay twice. Once to the IRS with money they'll never see again, and another time at the local level because someone will have to pay for the unfunded care somehow, some way.
Thank you. Senator Davis, it is now your turn to ask a question of Attorney General Abbott.
Mr. Abbott, your ruling regarding the Texas Enterprise Fund kept secret the fact that tens of millions of dollars had been awarded from the Texas Enterprise Fund to companies who didn't even apply. My question for you tonight is, will you agree to release any documentation, any communications that represent communications that you had during that time in reaching that decision?
You know, Senator, I actually think that you may be able to help in answering this question. Because if I recall correctly, one of the beneficiaries of that enterprise fund, whose application cannot be found, was Cabela's in Fort Worth. When you were a councilwoman on the Fort Worth City Council, you used taxpayer incentive dollars to attract Cabela there, and that Cabela benefited from the Texas Enterprise Fund. There is, however, one thing that you haven't disclosed. It's the fact that when you used those incentive funds to attract Cabela and then close the deal, it was your title company that benefited by closing that deal. So you personally profited. You were able to use your title company.
You are not telling the truth right now, and you know you are not telling the truth. I did not personally profit from that. And in fact, we did actually have an application that we reviewed very carefully. And we also, unlike what your office did, clawed back when Cabela's failed to realize the job creation numbers that they promised. Because as has always been the case with me, my obligation is to the hardworking people that I represent. And when private partners don't come through on their promises, I make sure that our public dollars are clawed back. You were the chief law enforcement officer over the Enterprise Fund. It was your responsibility to make sure that the tens of millions of dollars that were going to these companies were resulting in jobs. And you failed to do that. And then not only did you do it, you covered up the fact that in many instances they were given money without even applying for those monies.
Okay, that's time, but we do want to give you an opportunity to respond if you choose to.
Sure. I would like to respond by knowing how much your title company received by closing the Cabela's deal that was granted an award from the Texas Enterprise Fund.
It was not my title company. I was an employee of a title company earning a salary that was never dependent on any deal that ever closed. Mr. Abbott, this is about your failure as the chief law enforcement officer of this state to review and make sure that these funds weren't being used as slush funds for your donors. And yet you took $1.4 million in donations from people who received monies from the Texas Enterprise Fund, and you purposely looked the other way.
Okay, we're going to move on. We have a question now. Peggy Fekak has a question. It goes first to you, Senator Davis.
on a different